Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday, one quick trip to the hardware store, then everything unraveled. A shadow in the window, strangers inside, and a war with an HOA I never joined. What started with a cracked door ended in court, flames, and the fight of my life. It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday. I had just stepped out for a quick run to the hardware store, no more than 40 minutes tops. I needed a couple of bags of mulch and some extra screws for the garden trellis I'd been working on all week. The Texas sun was already baking the driveway when I pulled away, and I remember thinking I should have closed the side gate, but I was expecting a gravel delivery that afternoon and didn't want to miss it. That little decision turned out to be one hell of a mistake. When I came back, something immediately felt off. My front door, which I always lock, even if I'm just walking the dog, was cracked open. Not wide, just enough to make my stomach drop. I killed the engine and sat in the truck for a few seconds, watching the motionless facade of my house like it might blink or breathe. Then I saw it, someone moving behind the front window, a shadow, slow and deliberate. My first thought was break-in. My second, that my damn dog was inside, and if someone heard him, I'd bury them behind the shed. I dialed 911 before even stepping onto the porch. I kept my voice calm, gave them my name, address, and told them someone was in my house. The dispatcher told me to stay outside and wait for the officers. I did exactly that, stood in the driveway, keys in one hand, phone in the other, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. The cruiser pulled up in under 10 minutes. Thank God. Officer Warren, tall guy with a buzz cut and the kind of walk that said, "Not my first rodeo," approached and asked me to stay back as he approached the door. He had his hand on his holster as he stepped through the threshold. A few seconds later, I heard his voice inside. "Sir, ma'am, this is the police. Step into the living room, hands where I can see them." Then silence, followed by, unbelievably, voices arguing back. I couldn't make out the words until Officer Warren stepped back out and waved me in. "Mr. Miller, you're going to want to see this." I walked in and felt like I was in some bad satire. Two people, middle-aged, beige clothing, and those bright green HOA volunteer vests stood in my living room. One was holding a clipboard, the other a small tablet. They looked like overzealous mall cops who took a wrong turn and broke into someone's life. "Who the hell are you?" I snapped. "Green Pine HOA," said the woman without even flinching. "We're conducting a compliance inspection in response to a resident complaint." I blinked. "What the hell are you doing inside my house?" The man cut in, voice irritatingly calm. "Under Article 7, Subsection C of the Green Pine HOA Code, we're permitted to enter community properties to verify complaints of hazardous conditions and aesthetic violations." "That's great," I said, "except this isn't community property. This is my house. And I'm not in your damn HOA." They both exchanged a look like I'd just announced I was from Mars. "All properties on this street fall under the HOA's jurisdiction, sir," the woman said. "We have the map on file." "I have my deed," I shot back. "I specifically bought this house because it's not part of any HOA. I like my property unregulated and my lawn however the hell I want it. Get out." Officer Warren raised an eyebrow. "They have any right to be here?" "No," I said, "absolutely not." He turned back to the clipboard duo. "Then you're trespassing. Time to go." They grumbled, but complied. As they stepped out, the woman turned back with a little smirk. "You'll be hearing from the board." "Yeah," I said, "and they'll be hearing from my lawyer." I watched them walk off my property like they still owned it. Not a damn hint of shame. I stood in the middle of my living room, the place I built with my own hands, still reeking of lavender air freshener and faint authority complex. I didn't know what the hell had just happened, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. I locked the door behind them. Then I locked the gate. And then I went straight to my office to dig up every paper I had about this house. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. The next morning started off deceptively normal. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, still replaying yesterday's nonsense in my head, when I stepped outside and noticed a bright orange envelope taped to my front door. It was official looking, the kind of envelope that gives off that special brand of anxiety reserved for jury duty or IRS audits. In bold letters at the top, it read, "Notice of HOA violation. Immediate compliance required." I opened it right there on the porch, hands already shaking, not from fear, but rage. Inside was a printed list of alleged infractions. Section 3, Subsection 1, overgrown front lawn exceeding 4 inches in blade height. Section 4, Subsection 7, unapproved exterior structure, namely a non-compliant greenhouse visible from the street. Section 5, Subsection 2, improper storage of waste receptacles. Bins must be kept out of sight from the curb. Each violation came with its own lovely fine, starting at $100 per day. Per item, the letter ended with a firm demand: correct all violations within 10 days, or face escalating penalties and potential legal action. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I walked back inside, slammed the envelope down on the table, and stared at it like it might explode. They were doubling down. After being caught breaking into my home, they had the gall to treat me like I was the problem. So I did what any pissed-off homeowner would do. I started pulling paperwork. I went into my file cabinet and dragged out the thick folder labeled House Purchase 2019. Inside, title documents, surveys, legal boundaries, emails with my realtor, hell, even the plat map. Everything I had said the same thing. This property, Lot 18 of Miller Hollow, was not, and never had been, part of Green Pine HOA. But apparently, Green Pine HOA didn't care. 2 hours later, I got a knock at the door. It was Jerry, my 70-something neighbor from across the street, the kind of guy who'd been here long before I moved in, and probably knew every cracked sidewalk and dead oak tree within 3 blocks. I liked Jerry. He was quiet, minded his business, and waved every morning. He looked nervous, like a kid sneaking out of class. "I heard what happened yesterday," he said, voice low. "They're going after you now." "Who is they, Jerry?" He glanced around like we were being watched. HOA, or rather Karen. I'd heard the name, Karen Landis, the Queen Bee herself, president of Green Pine HOA. Short blonde hair, aggressive cardigans, and the personality of a deadbolt in heat. I'd never interacted with her before, and after the last 24 hours, I was hoping to keep it that way. "They did this before," Jerry said. "Started with people on the edge of the neighborhood, quiet ones, folks they thought wouldn't fight back. Claimed there was some vote, some kind of retroactive inclusion. Said if a majority of the HOA agreed, then it became law. That's not how real estate works," I muttered. "Nope," he agreed. "But they send letters, post fines, make threats. Most people just give in. Easier than fighting." I nodded slowly. This wasn't incompetence. It was a strategy. Over the next few days, more envelopes started showing up. One was hand-delivered and had the HOA seal embossed in gold. Real classy. It repeated the same nonsense. My property had been annexed by a recent community resolution effective 2 years ago. Apparently, I had missed the notification period to contest it, and by now, my silence was considered tacit acceptance. I was apparently now part of the cult, only I wasn't. Karen and her little army were building a paper wall around me, trying to trap me inside a jurisdiction I had no part of. The more I read, the more I realize they were pushing hard, fast, and with just enough bullshit legality to confuse most people into submission. But I wasn't most people. That night, I sent an email to an attorney I'd heard good things about. Her name was Camilla Rose, and she specialized in property law, especially cases involving HOA abuse. She replied within the hour, and we set up a meeting for the next day. Before I went to bed, I stood out in my yard, flashlight in hand, checking the side gate, the fences, the backyard. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being careful, because this wasn't about some untrimmed grass or a greenhouse. This was about control, and someone out there had decided they were entitled to mine. Camilla Rose looked nothing like I expected a lawyer to look. No stiff blazer, no dead eyes, no fake smile. She had a nose ring, black glasses, and a coffee cup that said "Sue Me" in bold white letters. Her office sat above a local bookstore, tucked away behind a creaky staircase and a door that still had an actual bell on it. She barely let me sit down before firing off questions like a prosecutor in a courtroom drama. "So they entered your home without a warrant or your permission?" "Correct. And you're sure your deed explicitly excludes you from HOA jurisdiction?" "Positive. I brought copies." She nodded, flipped through the documents, and muttered, "These assholes again." Turns out Green Pine HOA had a bit of a reputation. Camilla had already handled 2 cases involving them. Both settled quietly, but not without blood drawn. "They specialize in pressure," she said. "Paperwork, intimidation, pseudo-legal nonsense. They bank on you being tired, overwhelmed, or broke. Bad news for them, I replied. I've got time, rage, and a damn good job. She grinned at that, then leaned in. Then let's start swinging. That same afternoon, she filed an official cease and desist letter on my behalf. She sent it to the HOA board and personally CC'd Karen Landis. The letter cited multiple violations of Texas property law, criminal trespass, and harassment. Camilla even threw in a threat of civil damages if they so much as stepped on my grass again. But Green Pine didn't back off. Not even close. 3 days later, a landscaping crew showed up at my front yard. No warning, no permit, just there. Trimming bushes that didn't need trimming, ripping out a rose bed I'd planted myself, and marking my mailbox for replacement. One guy even started measuring my porch with one of those retractable tape measures like he was building a damn deck. I stormed out barefoot in gym shorts, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. "Who sent you?" I asked. The lead guy shrugged. "Work order from Green Pine HOA. I told them to leave. They didn't." I told them again, this time louder, with more colorful language and a promise of legal consequences. That worked. They packed up in a hurry, but not before tearing one of my solar lights out of the lawn. I called Camilla immediately. She told me to take photos, get statements, and keep receipts. "They're testing your boundaries," she said, "trying to provoke you into reacting badly so they can claim you're the problem." I started installing cameras that evening. 1 in the front yard, 2 on the sides, and a 4th pointed at my driveway. High definition, infrared, motion sensitive. If they so much as breathed near my shrubs again, I'd have them in full HD, ready to present in court. A week later, things escalated again. I was working late, trying to finish up a project for work, when I heard a knock. Not on the door, on the wall, my garage wall. I stepped out into the night and found a uniformed private security guard standing in my driveway. He wore a patch on his vest that said Green Pine HOA Compliance Patrol. Compliance Patrol? What the hell was this? East Berlin? "Sir," he said, "we've received a report of potential chemical storage violations on your property." "I'm sorry, what?" "The greenhouse. There may be hazardous materials present. Fertilizer, flammable liquids, solvents." I laughed in his face. "You mean Miracle Grow and Weed Killer? I'm going to need to inspect the interior, sir." "You're going to need a goddamn warrant." He didn't move, just stood there like some dime store RoboCop, waiting for me to blink first. I didn't. I told him he was trespassing, that I was calling the police, and that I had him on camera. That finally made him back off. Camilla filed another motion the next day, this time for a temporary restraining order against any representative of Green Pine HOA or its affiliates from stepping foot on my land. She filed it fast, with photos, recordings, everything. It was approved within 72 hours. That should have been the end of it, but instead of backing down, they changed tactics. That weekend, a full-page editorial appeared in the local community newsletter titled, "When One Home Harms the Whole." It didn't name me outright, but it didn't have to. It talked about certain residents refusing to participate in community standards, about dangerous structures, neglected lawns, and a willingness to isolate rather than integrate. My mailbox was flooded with copies, some highlighted in pink. They weren't just attacking me legally anymore. Now they were going for my reputation, and something in my gut told me this wasn't just about rules. Someone was going out of their way to make my life hell. Someone with a smile like a Stepford wife and a spreadsheet full of names. It was a Tuesday, hot and windless, the kind of day where even the shade feels aggressive. I was in my home office, headphones on, halfway through debugging a mountain of back-end code, when my phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from the backyard camera. At first, I thought it was the delivery guy, maybe finally dropping off the gravel I'd been waiting on for 2 damn weeks. I switched over to the live feed, expecting to see a guy in a neon vest with a dolly. What I saw instead made my blood freeze. 2 men, both in branded Green Pine HOA polos, were inside my backyard. One was rifling through a small stack of firewood I'd stacked near the fence, and the other was walking straight toward my shed. One of them had bolt cutters in his hand. I didn't even bother grabbing shoes. I was outside in under 10 seconds, sprinting barefoot across my lawn like a lunatic, heart hammering hard enough to drown out every rational thought. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled. One of them turned, startled, but the other didn't even flinch. He raised a laminated paper in one hand like it was a damn badge. Routine HOA inspection, sir. We've had multiple complaints about fire hazards and unauthorized chemical storage. We have a right to investigate under Section 8. You don't have any right to be here, I snapped. There's a restraining order in place, signed by a judge. The man with the bolt cutters finally stopped walking, but he didn't look apologetic. He just looked annoyed. We were told the order didn't apply to official safety inspections, he muttered. By who? He hesitated. Mrs. Landis. Of course, I was on the phone before they'd even made it back to their truck. This time, I called the sheriff's department directly and asked for someone to come deal with active criminal trespass. While I waited, I snapped pictures of everything, the bolt cutters, the broken latch on my shed, the HOA clipboard they left behind by mistake. I flipped through it and saw my name circled at the top, highlighted in red. Underneath it, someone had written in all caps, "Highest priority, target before summer vote." What the hell did that mean? Deputy Morales arrived 20 minutes later, and she was all business. Took statements, photos, and copies of everything. The two HOA clowns were long gone by then, but I had it all on video. She watched the footage on my phone, jaw tightening with every second. They said they had permission from the board, she asked. Board of what? I said. This isn't a goddamn country club. It's my backyard. She didn't argue. Instead, she asked me to send her the video files and told me she'd be forwarding the case to the county prosecutor. Camilla confirmed later that night that we were now looking at criminal trespass and property damage charges. The restraining order violation alone could be a misdemeanor. For a few glorious hours, I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. That weekend, I woke up to find my phone buzzing nonstop, missed calls, texts, even a few voicemails from people I barely knew. One of them was from Jerry. Hey Ed, you might want to check your mailbox. I went outside in my robe, still half asleep, and nearly tripped over the pile of mail shoved under the door. Dozens of flyers, all identical. Miller's Madness, Dangerous Neighbor, or Local Threat. One man's refusal is putting our community at risk. They were printed in full color, with grainy black and white photos of my house. One of the shots was of me yelling at the landscaping crew from last week. Another showed the greenhouse taken from an angle that had to be from someone's second-story window. My stomach turned. These weren't just accusations. They were propaganda. I checked the local Facebook group for Green Pine residents, public access, even for non-members. It had blown up overnight. A thread with over 200 comments, mostly people arguing about that guy on Lot 18 who was refusing to cooperate and causing problems for the whole neighborhood. Some were sympathetic, others were bloodthirsty. Karen herself had even chimed in, "Our HOA exists to protect and uplift. When one resident refuses to cooperate, we must all bear the burden. Community safety is not optional." It was signed with her name and position. Camilla was furious when she saw it. She drafted a formal complaint to the city attorney's office, not just about the trespassing, but now for libel and character defamation. They're trying to turn public opinion against you so they can justify something bigger, she said. They're trying to manufacture consent for more action. I started to believe her. That night, the drone appeared. It buzzed over my backyard like a goddamn hornet with a GoPro. I watched it hover, dip, pan, like it was searching for something incriminating. I waved it off with a broom, but it came back the next night. And the next. Camilla filed a formal privacy complaint with the FAA and local authorities, but it would take time. Everything in the system takes time. Meanwhile, I was fighting a war in slow motion while Karen kept pushing forward. They weren't just bending the law anymore. They were preparing to rewrite the rules entirely, and I had a sinking feeling they weren't done escalating. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and stale coffee, exactly the kind of place where truth went to suffocate in bureaucracy. Camilla and I sat across from each other at the long wooden table, flanked by boxes of paperwork, photos, video stills, and a thumb drive that could sink a yacht. The preliminary hearing had just started, and already Karen was putting on a masterclass in weaponized smugness. She sat at the opposite table in a tailored cream blazer, flanked by two HOA attorneys, both of them looking like they were on retainer from a firm called Intimidation and Obfuscation, LLP. She didn't acknowledge me, not even a glance, just kept whispering to her lawyer, nodding along like she was attending a PTA meeting and not defending herself from charges of trespassing, harassment, and unauthorized surveillance. The judge, an older man with tired eyes and a reputation for hating HOA drama, looked through the case file for nearly 10 minutes in silence before speaking. "Let's get one thing straight," he said, his voice gruff. "This is not a zoning hearing, a beautification dispute, or a social committee spat. This is a property rights case with criminal components. Treat it accordingly." Camilla stood and launched into her opening like a prize fighter. She presented our evidence methodically. The video of the backyard trespass, the footage of the so-called compliance patrol, the flyers, the drone footage, the copy of the restraining order, and, my personal favorite, the clipboard that labeled me a high-priority target. The judge's eyebrows went up at that one. Karen's lawyers tried to play it cool. They argued that the HOA had acted in good faith, that the community had voted on new jurisdiction lines, and that enforcement may have exceeded boundaries due to miscommunication. Miscommunication. As if breaking into someone's yard with bolt cutters was a missed text. Then came the twist. Karen's team filed a counterclaim right there in court, a petition to enforce HOA jurisdiction over my property, claiming it had been annexed during a 2021 special vote, and that my refusal to participate didn't exempt me. They submitted a blurry map, some typed minutes from a board meeting, and a page with what looked like my signature. Only problem? It wasn't my signature. Camilla didn't even flinch. She calmly requested a forensic handwriting analysis and pointed out that I had email records from the exact date they claimed I attended the vote, showing I was in Colorado at a tech conference. Then, things got weird. After the hearing adjourned for the day, a woman approached me in the hallway. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid Karen might materialize out of a potted plant. "You don't know me," she said, "but I live on Birchwood. HOA hit me with a violation last year for having the wrong color curtains." I blinked. Seriously? They fined me $400. Then someone called code enforcement and said I was operating a daycare without a license. I'm a teacher. I don't even have kids. I asked her why she was telling me this now. Because you're fighting back, and people are watching. I think there are a lot of us who've been waiting for someone like you. Over the next week, it became clear she wasn't exaggerating. Word spread. Camilla and I were contacted by 8 other residents, some with minor stories, some with full-on horror tales, fines for invisible fences, notices for invisible garbage. One guy had been reported for owning a non-regulation mailbox. Another had been cited for lawn aggression. Together, we built a case. Camilla filed a motion to consolidate all our claims into a class action lawsuit. 10 plaintiffs against Green Pine HOA and Karen Landis personally, citing fraud, abuse of power, harassment, and, for Karen specifically, knowingly submitting forged documents and violating court orders. Media caught wind of it fast. Local news did a feature. HOA or hostile takeover. Residents fight back. They used one of the drone shots, ironically taken by the HOA, as B-roll, showing my backyard with an over-the-shoulder zoom like I was some freedom fighter in the suburbs. Karen responded with more spin. She posted a letter on the HOA website titled In Defense of Order, filled with legalese, moralizing, and passive-aggressive Bible quotes. Camilla, meanwhile, had uncovered something far more interesting, a pattern. It turned out that Karen had a little side hustle. She'd been submitting the names and addresses of non-compliant residents to the city's inspection department. For every official citation the city issued, the HOA would assist in the enforcement process. In return, Karen's personal consulting firm, Civic Harmony Solutions, received administrative fees from a discretionary city beautification fund. In plain English, Karen was profiting off every fine the city slapped us with. It wasn't just HOA politics anymore. It was a goddamn racket. Camilla compiled the evidence, complete with wire transfers, timestamps, and contracts. We sent it to the local district attorney's office, along with a very polite cover letter that read, "We believe the enclosed may be of criminal interest." Meanwhile, I kept my head down and my cameras rolling, because the more we pushed, the more desperate Karen became. And desperate people, they tend to make mistakes. Big ones. It started just after midnight. I was asleep, or trying to be, when a loud crack snapped me upright. At first, I thought maybe the dog had knocked something over in the kitchen, but when I stepped into the hallway, I caught the scent of smoke. My front yard was glowing orange. I ran outside barefoot, heart already slamming, and saw it. A trash can up in flames on my lawn right beside the mailbox. The flames licked upward, melting the plastic bin and charring the grass, the smoke choking the air with that bitter chemical stink. Someone had set it on fire. I grabbed the garden hose and sprayed the hell out of it, soaking the ground until there was nothing left but wet ash and a twisted puddle of black plastic. I stood there panting, shirtless, soaked, and absolutely livid. Then I noticed the spray paint. "Tyrant" scrawled across my garage door in red, sloppy letters dripping like blood. By the time the police arrived, I'd already checked the security footage. Clear as daylight, a person in a hoodie, short, quick, sneaking up the sidewalk at exactly 12:37 a.m. She carried a can in one hand, something bulky in the other. After tagging the garage, she carefully placed the trash can on the lawn, dumped something inside, lit it, and ran off. It wasn't random vandalism, it was a performance. When I watched the footage a second time, pausing frame by frame, I noticed something familiar. The distinct walk, the cut of the hair peeking out of the hood. It was Karen. She had actually done it. The head of the HOA had crossed the final line, staging a fake attack on my house to make it look like I'd been retaliated against, or worse, to paint herself as the victim if anything escalated. But the cherry on top? She filed a police report against me 2 hours later, claimed she was concerned for her safety, had reason to believe Mr. Miller was becoming unstable, and had received threatening notes from anonymous sources she suspected were connected to me. Within hours, I had officers knocking on my door, again, asking questions, taking statements, and doing the whole, "we're just trying to get a full picture" routine. Fortunately, I had the picture, Karen on my property, lighting the fire. I handed it over without a word. By dawn, Camilla was on the phone with the DA's office, sending them the same footage, alongside timestamps, her previous violations, and a concise legal argument titled, "This Woman Has Lost Her Goddamn Mind." To their credit, the DA moved fast. By the afternoon, Karen Landis was served with a temporary restraining order, not just from me, but from all 10 plaintiffs in our class action lawsuit. The footage hit the local news within 24 hours. The headline read, "HOA President Caught Staging Attack in Escalating Neighborhood Feud." But even as the public started to turn against her, Karen didn't go quietly. Her lawyer gave a press statement implying the footage was digitally manipulated, and that Karen was the real victim of a smear campaign by a fringe group of anti-HOA extremists. That phrase, anti-HOA extremists, would have made me laugh if I hadn't been so furious. But something strange happened after the story aired. People started coming forward, not just from Green Pine, but from other HOAs in the county. Folks who'd been targeted, fined, surveilled, and harassed. Camilla's inbox was flooded. We got voicemails, letters, even a few walk-ins at her office. She had to hire 2 interns just to catalog everything. It was no longer about Karen. It was about the system she'd been exploiting. And apparently, she hadn't been working alone. One of Camilla's legal researchers found a buried reference in a city budget document, a line item marked Beautification Enforcement Coordination Fund. It had been quietly approved 3 years ago, with discretionary control given to a city code. Enforcement officer, whose surprise had formerly served on Green Pine's board. The whole thing stunk like a dead raccoon in July. Karen had been feeding names to city officials, who would then send formal citations, giving her legal leverage to punish residents, while she collected consulting fees from the HOA for resolving the violations. It wasn't just a power trip anymore, it was a grift. Camilla contacted a journalist at the local paper who specialized in municipal corruption. Within 48 hours, she'd published a feature titled "The HOA Cartel: How One Woman Turned Community Governance into Personal Profit." It lit a firestorm. The city council called an emergency meeting. The mayor issued a statement. The DA opened an official investigation. And Karen, she vanished. Her house went dark. Her car disappeared from the driveway. No one answered her phone, and the HOA office line went to voicemail with a chipper message about reorganization in progress. But the damage was done. The machine she'd built, rigid, invasive, smug, was still running. And there were still people inside that system pulling levers. Camilla leaned across her desk one evening, flipping through a stack of new affidavits. "This is bigger than we thought," she said. "You were never just a target." She looked me dead in the eye. "You were an example." The courtroom was packed. I didn't think people still showed up for these kinds of hearings, civil suits, HOA disputes, procedural motions, but that morning it was standing room only. News crews were posted outside the courthouse doors like it was a murder trial. Camilla and I had to push through a crowd of reporters just to get inside. Microphones, questions, camera flashes. Everyone wanted a soundbite from the guy who'd taken on the HOA Hydra. I didn't give them one. Not yet. Karen finally showed up. She entered flanked by her lawyers like a fallen queen in exile. Gone was the cream blazer and smug smile. She wore all black and sunglasses indoors like she thought she was on her way to court and a funeral. And maybe she was, because what followed felt like a slow, brutal burial. The judge, same one from the earlier hearing, looked more alert this time. Maybe he smelled blood in the water. Maybe he'd finally read the full case file. Either way, he opened with no pleasantries. We are here today to consider a motion to certify a class action lawsuit, review charges of criminal misconduct, and determine the standing of Green Pine HOA's board leadership. Camilla stood and dropped a binder onto the table with a thunk that echoed like a gavel. She went through everything: the trespasses, the forged signature, the HOA's illegal surveillance, the fake vote, the staged attack, and the financial scheme Karen had been running under the table. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer. The drone footage, the clipboard with high priority target before summer vote, the financial records, the emails between Karen and the city inspector, the fire, the graffiti, the footage. My God, the footage. Camilla played the whole video in court. Karen creeping up my driveway, lighting the trash can, spray painting the garage like she was auditioning for a low-budget horror film. The room went dead silent except for the audio crackling from the courtroom speakers. Karen's lead attorney objected, argued that the footage was prejudicial. The judge overruled it without blinking. Then came the real punch. Camilla called 3 witnesses from other neighborhoods, residents who had been fined, harassed, or pushed out of their homes in eerily similar ways. One of them, an elderly man named Samuel from a neighborhood 2 miles away, testified that after refusing to replace his fence, he was hit with a dozen violations and ultimately sold his home in foreclosure. I never even joined their HOA, he said, voice trembling. They just showed up one day, said I didn't have a choice. It was devastating. Then came the city's own representative, an internal affairs investigator, who confirmed that yes, funds had been routed through a discretionary beautification account, and yes, consulting payments had been made to a private entity owned by Karen. Landis. The prosecution rested. Karen's team tried to shift the blame, claimed that her intent had always been community stewardship, that she had been misled by overzealous subordinates, that the attack on my property was a psychotic break brought on by stress and intimidation. That one nearly made me laugh. When Karen was finally called to speak, she gave a performance worthy of a soap opera. She cried. She talked about the burden of leadership. She called herself a victim of online hatred. She claimed that I had incited a mob against her and that all her actions had been attempts to preserve order and harmony. The judge just stared at her, silent. Then, in a voice as flat as drywall, he said, "Mrs. Landis, you are hereby removed from any official capacity within the Green Pine Homeowners Association, effective immediately." She blinked, just like that. Power gone. Then he added, "The court will also refer your actions for further review by the district attorney's office and recommend charges of criminal trespass, defamation, destruction of property, falsifying official records, and filing a false police report." Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing, just nodded, slow and stiff. The rest came quickly. The HOA was placed under court supervision. An independent audit was ordered. All fines issued by Green Pine in the last 3 years were frozen pending investigation. Every plaintiff in our suit was awarded preliminary damages. Mine alone totaled over $75,000. Camilla leaned over and whispered, "We just burned their whole playbook." Outside the courthouse, it was chaos again. Microphones, lights, questions flying like darts. Camilla gave a brief statement, crisp and professional. I stepped up behind her, not planning to speak, but the crowd pressed in. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Miller, how does it feel to take down the HOA?" I paused. Then I said, "This was never about taking anyone down. It was about getting my damn rights back." The clip went viral. Later that week, Green Pine's website quietly disappeared. Karen's house was listed for sale. Cash only. No tours. Rumors flew that she was moving out of state. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. Because the deeper we dug, the more we realized Karen wasn't the only one pulling strings. And Green Pine wasn't the only HOA playing dirty. What we'd uncovered, it was just the beginning. It's been 6 months since the ruling. The grass is longer than it should be. The greenhouse still stands unpainted, and I haven't received a single envelope taped to my door in half a year. Peace, as it turns out, doesn't arrive with a banner or a speech. It just shows up one day, sits on your porch, and waits for you to notice it. But peace is never the whole story. Not when you've been through war. After the verdict, things didn't just settle. They shifted. Neighbors who used to glance at me like I was radioactive started waving again. Some even stopped to talk. Jerry, across the street, mowed the edge of my lawn one morning without saying a word, just left a thumbs up taped to my mailbox. Camilla called it community unlearning, the slow process of people realizing they'd been part of something rotten, even if they didn't mean to be. A few Green Pine board members resigned quietly. One issued a formal apology. Another tried to start a new HOA under a different name, the Neighborhood Enrichment Council, but no one showed up to the first meeting. The lawsuit payout came in staggered checks. Mine arrived with a zero too many at the end. Camilla caught the error and flagged it before I could do something irresponsible, like buy a boat just to flip off Karen on her way out of town. Speaking of Karen, she pleaded out, no trial, no cameras. Just a quiet agreement with the DA. Pay restitution, step down permanently from any HOA-related activities, and stay the hell away from any of us. Word is she moved to Arizona, changed her last name, and is now running a Facebook group called Community Pride for Patriots. Of course. But that wasn't the end of it. Because the deeper Camilla dug, alongside that journalist from the paper, the more skeletons started falling out of HOA closets across the county. Turns out Green Pine wasn't the only place where citations were being weaponized, where backyard fire pits became criminal offenses, where mailboxes got people fined into foreclosure. The Beautification Coordination Fund? It existed in 4 different districts. Camilla launched a nonprofit with the settlement money, Home Guard Legal Defense, a free service for homeowners bullied by overreaching HOAs. Within 3 weeks, her inbox was overloaded. Within 3 months, she'd hired 6 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and a guy named Cliff who could dig through zoning records like a truffle pig on espresso. She asked me to join, not full-time, just to consult. Maybe help new clients understand how these systems work, what red flags to look for. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't need to. Now I meet with people twice a week in a tiny office next to hers. I tell them my story. I show them the footage. I let them see the before and after, my house, my yard, my life. And I remind them, you're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not powerless. And every time I see someone walk out of that office a little straighter, a little louder, I know it was worth it. We even put up a small sign at the end of my block. No HOA zone. Community, not control. Some folks scoffed. A few muttered about slippery slopes and lawlessness. But you know what happened next. Nothing. No violations, no fines, no drones, just neighbors. Kids playing, dogs barking, barbecues that smell like summer should. Last week, Jerry brought over a bottle of whiskey and told me something I hadn't expected. You didn't just win, Ed, he said, pouring us each a glass. You broke the spell. I laughed. But he was right. Karen didn't just run a rogue HOA. She ran a system built on quiet fear, polite compliance, and the assumption that no one would push back. Until I did. And if I had to do it all again, every fine, every flyer, every sleepless night, I would. In a heartbeat. Because this is my home. And I'll be damned if anyone ever tries to steal it from me again.